Welcome to the Market Frontlines. I'm Lyndsay Malchuk. $81.8 billion. That is what Ottawa just committed to defense reinvestment, alongside a clear declaration that sovereign capability is now a national priority. Now, this isn't incremental policy. This is a structural reset of how capital, security, and industrial power will be built into this country. Yesterday's defense industrial strategy was not simply an announcement. It was a signal. Build in Canada, control your IP, prioritize uncrewed and autonomous systems, accelerate procurement, protect the North. That changes the competitive landscape overnight. And sitting right in the middle of that specific shift is Glen Lynch, CEO of Volatus Aerospace, a company that did not wait for the policy tailwind. They secured manufacturing capacity that acquired strategic drone assets, that invested in autonomy and national operational infrastructure before uncrewed systems were firmly elevated to sovereign priority. Glen, this is pretty big news and lots already in the pipeline for Volatus, so great to have you back with us to sit on the show.
Well, first, Lyndsay, thanks for having me again. You're absolutely right. This is a big deal for Canada. It's a big deal for Canada. It's a big deal for defense industry in Canada.
Absolutely. Now, this is not incremental. This is structural, and investors need to understand exactly who is positioned to win here, Glen. So this is where we want to begin. The federal government just released that what many are calling a general defense industrial strategy, with 70% of procurement targeted to Canadian firms and uncrewed systems formally designated as sovereign capability. Now, you say Volatus is not reacting, but already aligned. So what specifically did you build ahead of this policy that now puts you at the front of the line rather than scrambling to catch up?
Well, I think the first thing to understand is that Canada's put this forward as an industrial framework. So it's not just a budget increase, it's actually an entire strategy. And what it does more than anything is create clarity. It signals a long-term demand, it prioritizes sovereign capability, and it puts uncrewed systems, autonomy, and advanced technologies at the center of the conversation, which is exactly where Volatus lives. So from our standpoint, it's important because it's validated the direction that we've been going for quite some time, and mostly, particularly over the past year, with the acquisition of the IP portfolio, which are a whole bunch of long-range, high-endurance drones that we're relocating from the UK to build in Mirabel and the Mirabel factory. It validated our direction. I think we're very well positioned from a company standpoint.
Well, then take that a little bit further. The strategy introduces a clear build-first hierarchy and creates a new defense investment agency to accelerate procurement. So investors who have watched defense timelines drag for years, what actually changes for Volatus in terms of speed to contract, visibility of revenue, and reduction of procurement risk?
It's a generational shift. What's happened, if you look back at our Prime Minister in June of last year, one of the comments was that we needed to increase our defense spending. Those were some pretty big targets that were sent out. But during the same speech, he identified that historically, 3/4 of the Canadian defense spending was spent outside of Canada. So predominantly in the United States, but generally outside of Canada. The new defense industrial strategy mandates that 70% of procurement is now directed to Canadian companies, which is super exciting. The challenge is, of course, after decades of not buying in Canada, we're now really investing in an industry to build that ecosystem. And with it, not just the defense industry, but the economic impact to our company of repatriating a lot of that commercial activity into Canadian companies.
So then here's what no one is really asking then. Volatus ranked number 16 overall and number 1 among non-resource companies on the 2025 TSX Venture 50 out of roughly 1,600 issuers. Congratulations. That's serious capital markets validation right there. So with that credibility now, Glen, in place, how do you avoid becoming a story stock riding policy headlines, instead convert this moment into durable earnings power?
So I think the first thing, Volatus has been a company that's focused on execution. And no matter what, this is an opportunity for Canadian defense industry at large to be re-rated by investors. The demand signals reduce risk. Reduced risk reduces the cost of capital, which enables an accelerated growth in the industry. So we've typically traded as a Canadian defense industry at a discount to our U.S. peers. I think this is an opportunity now for the investment community to actually relook at what's happening. Now, from Volatus's standpoint, no matter what, right? Business doesn't come from headlines; it comes from contracts. The Defense Investment Agency is new, right? It's going to take some time before they're up and operational. And at this point in time, it's still a procurement process. So there's still a few unknowns in there in terms of timelines, but definitely there's a strong will. And we're seeing that not just from the government of Canada and from this policy, but also from the Canadian Armed Forces. For Volatus, we believe that regardless, everything is based around execution, right? The markets are going to react to headlines, but sustained value is going to be created by how we execute as a company. And we tried to get a jump start on that with our acquisition of the portfolio of aircraft in the UK in late last year, and our commitment and current ramp of the manufacturing facility for drones at Mirabel.
That's true. So, you touched on a good point, is defense has really become more than just noise, we'll say. It's definitely become a focal point in many of the industries out there. And at the same time we're talking about this, I'm going to jump over to something else. Now, you've mentioned this as well. You have ramped up your RPAS manufacturing hub in Mirabel, Quebec, and acquired a portfolio of medium-altitude, long-endurance drones that directly tie into Arctic and remote operations. That's another huge story right there. So with Arctic sovereignty now backed by billions in northern infrastructure spending, are you positioning Volatus as a strategic Arctic operator, a manufacturer, a systems integrator, or all three? And where does the highest margin opportunity actually sit here?
So if I describe the company the way I see it, I prefer that people don't look at us as a collection of services or products, but rather as a capability partner that's already operating at a commercial scale. And the example I use, you hear the term dual-use technology mentioned frequently right now. And if we want to put it in its simplest term, a dual-use technology is obviously something that has both potential defense applications and civil applications. Well, Volatus, one of our primary sources of revenue is in the oil and gas industry, monitoring pipeline integrity. So we do literally, north of 1 million miles, almost 1.7 million kilometers a year of pipeline integrity monitoring. Well, whether you're monitoring a pipeline, a power line, a railway, a border, a shoreline, any of those issues, they're all the same thing. It's kind of like I always make a comparison. While the technology itself is slightly different, military technology has some additional considerations that the civil world doesn't have to deal with. But whether we're collecting data to analyze a farm field or a battlefield, it's exactly the same, right? It's a matter of collecting data. It's what the data is used for. The platforms can be different. Sensors can be different, although they tend to be common. And that's kind of how it works. So in terms of the Arctic, when we acquired our portfolio of aircraft, there's 3 of them. One of them will fly for about 10 hours. That's really meant for civilian type work. It uses a gas engine for power. The other 2 are powered by heavy fuel. One of them will operate for between 20 and 35 hours, depending on whether we're using a drop system on the wings or whether we're adding additional fuel. And the other one will fly for several days, north of 4 days of operations with heavy fuel. Those larger 2 aircraft are the ones that we're actually hardening for the Canadian Arctic. And fundamentally, being Canadian, the Arctic is a part of our environment. And, between, I would say, Finland, Greenland, and Canada, we're pretty well versed to look at the Arctic. I think Canada is very well positioned with the skill sets and understanding to be able to capitalize on the opportunity and develop the services that Canada needs to protect our sovereignty.
Well, your story is fascinating. What is it that you think that investors are still not either pricing in or they're missing about the company right now?
So I think we fly a little bit under the radar. Right now there's a lot of focus on the United States. Canada hasn't typically spent a lot of money on defense. I think it's been an underspend. We've been missing our targets with NATO since at least 2015. This current this current push to reinvest in our military and increase our NATO spend to 2%, then 3.5% and 5% that we've committed to is a massive commitment to the Canadian industry. I honestly believe the challenge with investors actually valuing Canadian defense companies, not just Volatus, but it's been simply the demand signal and their ability to determine what the risk is. Right now, the defense industrial strategy spells out the Canadian government priorities very clearly. And I think Volatus fits very tightly into that space already. It's like we didn't actually pivot into this space. We were already built for it.
Yeah. Well, there's so much more that we could definitely speak about. I am so fascinated with your company, that's for sure. And I know we're running out of time, so I'll leave you with this final question. The government is talking about protecting Canadian intellectual property and strengthening domestic control of critical technologies. You've invested early in autonomy, AI, as well as ISR capabilities. So when your international demand accelerates, how do you scale globally without compromising sovereign control or even diluting the very IP that now makes you strategically valuable?
So that's always it's a balancing act, but under our chief technology officer, we actually balance those priorities. So we have a general counsel that works directly with our CTO and determines in some cases it's copyright, in some cases it's patents. The company right now carries about 14 active patents. So we do go through that exercise, but IP security is something that we focus on, considerably, especially now. If you look, we're hiring a lot of people in the autonomy space, and I think that that's going to continue to be a big subject for us. But we're very, very conscious of protecting the IP. We consider it to be a strategic asset.
What a conversation. Wow, I am blown away. And Glen, I'll tell you this, it takes a lot for me to be blown away. So thank you so much. Let's continue this conversation very soon. I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Lyndsay. Had a lot of fun. Good to see you again.
We'll see you soon. Again, that was Glen Lynch, CEO of Volatus Aerospace, trading on the venture under FLT and on the OTCQX under TAKOF. Definitely flip over to their website to get their full story at volatusaerospace.com. You will not be undersold with this one, I'll tell you that. This is not a policy bump. This is a national reordering of who builds, who owns, and who controls critical technology here in Canada. Capital is going to move and contracts are going to be awarded. The only question that matters now is who executes with the speed, the precision, and the discipline. And Volatus is standing directly in that lane. I'm Lyndsay Malchuk with Appeton Media. Stay tuned. There is more coming.